Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
I want to say to the whistleblower, if the whistleblower is watching you tonight, that we are grateful for their courage in coming forward. We are going to do everything we can to make sure this urgent issue is addressed and that you are protected.
That was House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff in the last hour on MSNBC with Rachel. Joining us now is Joel Brenner, the former Inspector General of the National Security Agency under President George W. Bush from 2002 to 2006. Joel Brenner was also the head of U.S. counterintelligence in the Office of the Director of National Intelligence from 2006 to 2009. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, Mr. Brenner. We really appreciate it. You've been there. You've been an Inspector General.
I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. Just give us your reading on this situation as we know it at this hour.
Look, we've got a statute here that's pretty clear on its face. You have a complaint that's come in. It does appear to be urgent. And by the way, the decision as to whether this is a matter of urgent concern that should be reported to the Congress is not a matter that under the statute is for the Justice Department, not for the President, and not for the Director or Acting Director. It's a matter that's been left to the discretion of the IG himself, Mr. Atkinson. And Mr. Atkinson has treated this thing in the proper way and passed it within a 7-day period to the acting director who's sitting on it. Now, this is, on its face, a clear violation of the statute. So what could Mr. McGuire be saying as to why he isn't doing this? Or what could the Justice Department be saying to him? You know, it's either that they say two things. One is that this is none of the IG's business. And that's silly, and I'll tell you why, Lawrence. The statute gives the IG two different responsibilities. One is the responsibility to investigate certain things within the intelligence community. The other is to report certain things that come to his attention, whether he investigated them or not. That's what this is about. So when the White House or the Justice Department says that the IG has no business investigating this matter, it's beyond his remit, that's irrelevant. This is a matter that pertains to the operations and administration of the intelligence community, and that's why he's gone forth and doing this. And then there's the privilege issue, if you'd like me to talk about that as well. Apparently, Justice is saying there's an executive privilege here. But the executive privilege would not stand up in light of either a criminal matter, either a normal criminal matter, or a high crime and misdemeanor, if that were involved. And I think, Lawrence, that's why the president has just now taken this outlandish position that not only can a sitting president not be indicted, but he can't even be investigated. Because if he can't be investigated, nobody could try to breach his privilege with an allegation that this is a matter of criminal behavior. So we're really in some very deep constitutional water here, in my opinion.
So you don't find it coincidental that today is the day when the president's lawyers in Manhattan, as we're going to discuss with Professor Lawrence Tribe in a moment, actually filed a lawsuit saying the president is not subject to criminal process, which was something Richard Nixon would have liked to know when he was complying with criminal process and a subpoena. And the fact of the action that we're now seeing from the acting director of National intelligence, that he is behaving, it seems, as if the president cannot be investigated.
Yeah, I think let's make a distinction, Lawrence, between an IG investigation and the president's being subjected to criminal process. I think the issue as to whether he can be subjected to criminal process would be very difficult if he can't be indicted. I'm going to let my former teacher, Larry Tribe, talk about that one. But that has nothing to do with whether the Inspector General or the Congress could investigate criminal behavior. And if there is criminal behavior here, and if the privilege is being asserted to shield criminal behavior, I think the privilege falls apart. No coincidence here. Let me
go to a line in the law here governing the Inspector General's work and the DNI's work on this. And this is the sentence that I think the Intelligence Committee is probably worried about now, because Adam Schiff has made some public comments about the possibility of suing to obtain this. But the law says an action taken by the director or the Inspector General under this paragraph shall not be subject to judicial review, which means that you cannot bring a lawsuit to sue the director based on any decision he makes under this law.
Well, but I think that statute is saying that the IG's decision cannot be subject to judicial review, which means I think the IG his discretion can't be challenged. If the IG says it's a matter of urgent concern that should be reported, I don't think somebody can go to court and challenge that. I think that's different than whether somebody could go to court and challenge the behavior of the acting director, who seems to have forgotten that he is oath is to the Constitution, not to the president. You know, one sees this in former military officers who forget that they're no longer in a chain of command with a commander-in-chief at the top. They're in the civilian government now. It's quite a different thing.
Well, just take a second for that. Is that a phenomenon that you've observed that, because Joseph McGuire spent about 36 years, I think, in the Navy, and that people with long careers in the military are more accustomed to a notion of chain of command starting in the Oval Office?
Yes, I have observed that. I think the military has a great tradition of subordination to civil authority and to a chain of command. And when they get a command, whether they like it or not, they snap and salute. That's good. We value that. Once they're in the civilian government, they still have obligations to follow rules and follow directives from above, but he certainly didn't have an obligation, if this is what he did, to ask for advice from the Justice Department or the White House, nor did he have an obligation, I think, to follow that advice. He needs to remember who he works for, and his oath is to the Constitution, not to the president.
It is Friday, the 20th of September of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Well, the French 77s are all ready for you. Do take care, even in the virtual world, the French 77, though being the most balanced cocktail in the history of cocktails, it is still a very potent one, so do take care. Oh, it is a tasty cocktail, indeed. Well, quite a bit of news. Of course, this whistleblower case is blowing up, though there's a lot of Trump troll bots out there who are ignoring it tremendously. Yes. But they are out there, still getting hammered by the anti-vaxxers. That may be independent of the Trump issues, though it is still part of a whole, because remember, the anti-vaxxer movement is part of a hostile foreign powers, shall we say, active measures. Follow the rubles. I don't know, follow the yen too. I would. And so that was at the top, former Inspector General for the NSA, laying it out. And looks like Bill Barr really ought to be occupying the John Mitchell cell. And I think it should be sooner rather than later. Yes, and who knew? Who knew that after all this, they would have come up with another secret OLC memo that basically says, oh yeah, when Donald Trump is the president of the United States, the president can sell out America. The president can bribe another foreign power to dig dirt on a political opponent as revenge for his campaign manager being convicted and thrown in federal prison. Nancy, I think you better start calling it an impeachment investigation. Make it real. Yeah, now, Ukrainian official came out this morning and said, yeah, we will dig up dirt on Joe Biden, but we have to have an official okay from Donald Trump. An official one, not the phone calls that have now been part of this whistleblower complaint. Donald Trump bribed the Ukraine by withholding congressional-approved military aid to keep the Russians at bay. And, of course, in the MAGA-hatted Trump bro Colt 45 world, oh, it's just Russia, Russia, Russia. Well, it's not just Russia. But Russia is a part of it. And this whistleblower complaint is not just about a phone call bribing the Ukraine. It is about many phone calls to many world leaders. And were they being bribed, threatened? What else did Trump do in violating the law to serve his means, not the means of the United States? That is why he was turned in by a whistleblower, who I should add was in the White House. Highly partisan, according to Donald Trump, meaning that person must have questioned Trump on occasion. You don't do that to dear leader. You don't ever question dear leader. Look, Ukraine Trump's neck to Congress, he will break yours. He will. Okay, so that's where we are there. And it's only going to get worse. Constitutional crisis? Yeah, I think so. I want to know how it is that the OLC has a much greater power than the Constitution of the United States. Bill Barr, I want to remind folks, is part of Opus Dei. You can take that where you want. I'm not going to put on the tinfoil hat of conspiracy theory and make the Opus Dei idiots a part of the Rothschilds and the Templars. But they do have an outsized influence in our body politic, and it must stop. This authoritarian, heavy-handed, undemocratic behavior has to stop. How do we stop it? Well, we raise our voices, and that's what our representatives are doing right now. I suppose we have to follow the rules to make them work, but you know what? Why not weaponize those rules like they're weaponized against democracy? Not against us, against democracy itself. How about getting tough? Let's stop with this Biden wallowing. Oh, Clarence Thomas said it was a high-tech lynching. Well, we just have to throw Anita Hill to the curb and kick her while she's there to prove that we're not bigots. What a whiny-ass, weak-ass, liberal, weak-kneed attitude. I thought we had stopped doing that. No, apparently not. A sternly worded letter from Nancy is not going to do it. I know Nancy knows something that we don't, but we have to not care. If there is dirt on our side, deal with it. There is greater harm done by allowing this to continue. Yeah. If you decided to get dirty, when the chickens come home to roost, it's going to hit our side too, but we have to remain strong. Our resolve is for democracy itself, not the individuals caught up in it. Wow, that was kind of a Friday rant, and I haven't even had one French 77 yet. What's on the rest of the menu here on the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, Moscow Mitch took credit for adding $250 million to election security after blocking the bill for months. In fact, every election security bill that came before him since the Democrats took over. Education Secretary Betsy DeVos wants to pull funding from a Middle East studies program offered by Duke and the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Why? Because it teaches too much Islam. A Middle East program teaches too much Islam. Okay. And citing a glut of modern sporting rifles. Well, that's a nice way of putting it. Gunmaker Colt suspended production of the AR-15 for the civilian commercial market. After the break, we then move to the chef's table, where Amnesty International accused Hong Kong police of torture and other abuses of protesters. And fumigation against mosquitoes in Cuba, not sonic attacks, may have caused U.S. and Canadian diplomats to fall ill in Havana. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page, right there by the social media scroll, is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln, by the way, and we thank Kelly for doing so. To the leftish of the page, from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will then notice our Patreon link. And if you could, please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. You know, a small amount. Say, how about monthly coffee? How about buying a monthly espresso-type coffee for us? And we will take those funds and convert them into Resistance Radio. And we've been doing this for 8 years, and we become masters at it, quite. Though the bulk of our funds do come out of our own wallets, we would be unable to do this without you, and we thank you for your generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and we thank Tom. I take care of at Justice Putnam, and I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime and get that linked up on social media. And do please look at the show notes and links diary. You'll get the full sources and everything that they wrote without my additions. So then you can, find it funny or not. You can follow the show on Twitter at CookbookWest and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and really wherever podcasts can be found. All right, let's take a look at this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and it comes out of Share Blue Media by Dan Desai Martin. Yesterday, Thursday, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell finally caved to months of pressure from Democrats and members of his own party and agreed to add $250 million in election security funding. I'm proud the financial services and the general government bill included a bipartisan amendment providing another $250 million to help states improve their defenses and shore up their voting systems, McConnell said on the Senate floor. I should jump in here. The Democrats introduced a bill to lower the prices for prescription drugs for seniors. He's taking credit for that now, too, after blocking it. Well, they don't call him Moscow Mitch for nothing. McConnell may try to claim credit, but he led Republican opposition to the same amount of money when Democrats demanded it last year, only after a year of relentless pressure by Democrats and even some Republicans to protect democracy. Has McConnell finally given in? It's not all the money we requested, and it doesn't include a single solitary reform that virtually everyone knows we need, but it's a start, Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said after McConnell relented. I have my own issues with Chuck, but he is in there doing the fight, so we got to hand it to that. We got to hand that to him. Schumer noted that McConnell still has not committed to legislative reforms many see as necessary to ensure free and fair elections across the country, because if there were free and fair elections across the country, the Republicans would no longer hold even a minority stake in our body politic. And if you think we will be a one-party system because the Democrats have all the power, you forget we're Democrats. It's a multi-party system in the Democratic Party. Jeez. Or as some people say, it's a party without a parliament. There, that's it. In July, Schumer asked for unanimous consent for the Senate to pass the Securing America's Federal Elections Act, a bill to provide $600 million in election assistance to states and require paper ballot backups, but McConnell objected at the time. A few days later, McConnell complained on the Senate floor about widespread media's criticism of his nonstop efforts to block any and all attempts to make elections more secure. McConnell's objections were so omnipresent that those in favor of election security dubbed him Moscow Mitch, alluding to Russian interference in the 2016 election on behalf of Trump and the country's continued efforts to undermine U.S. democracy. Rather than to protect America's interests, McConnell seemed willing to allow Russia to interfere unimpeded. Well, of course. You got Deripaska pumping money into your state with a bunch of, you get to dip your beak in quite a bit for that. Plus what your wife is bringing in from her family in China. Do you really want fair and free elections? Now that McConnell has relented on election security, Schumer called on McConnell to bring up legislation that would further protect elections. Otherwise, Schumer said, the job will remain incomplete and our democracy vulnerable. Well, I would say that is a feature, not a bug. Next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Hey, we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. This offering comes out of Talking Points memo by Christina Cabrera. Just to preface, I was in a bit of a spat with one of the usual libertarian suspects here in the Facebook community pages, who insists that we Democrats, we liberals, extremist liberals, infantile when it comes to economics, that we just don't understand any of it, and that higher education is not important today. The modern university is nothing but a redundancy. It's not even needed. We need more trade schools. As if, there's not a trade school for-profit scam going on right now. And then Betsy DeVos is a part of. So, part of the argument was that the modern university doesn't teach all sides anymore. Which just made me aware that person has never had to defend a thesis in front of a committee, ever. They don't know anything about academe, but they have a lot of opinions about it. Well, Betsy DeVos is I don't know what better word there could be to ascribe to her but a monster. And you know about monsters. No matter what you do, they keep coming back. The Trump administration has threatened to pull funding from a Middle East studies program offered by Duke University and the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, which the administration deems to be too biased in favor of Islam. So much for a separation of church and state. So much for academic independence. So much for teaching all sides of the issue. Their complaint is that there are other religions and cultures in the Middle East, and you don't teach them enough. Yes, they do. The Department of Education published its letter to the two universities this week regarding the Duke-UNC Consortium for Middle East Studies, informing university officials that the program may not qualify for Title VI funding. According to the department, the Duke UNC CMES does not adequately promote foreign language learning and advance the national security interests and economic stability of the United States. So let me figure out what this libertarian argument is now. The universities are teaching nothing but propaganda. But the U.S. government is saying they're not teaching propaganda enough. Which is it? I'm just so confused. Which is it? Assistant Secretary of Education Robert King laid out the department's grievances in a letter sent on August 29th, including complaints that the Middle East Studies program is disproportionately balanced in favor of Islam. I know a little bit about how academe works, and when you get these complaints that something is a little bit too much in favor of a particular subject, it means because the subject is merely being taught. The Duke UNC CMES appears to lack balance, as it offers very few, if any, programs focused on the historic discrimination faced by and current circumstances of religious minorities in the Middle East, including Christians, Jews, Baha'is, Yazidis, Kurds, Druze, and others, King wrote. Well, you know what? Why don't you put on your little whirling dervish gown and beat your back with some lashes to show your fealty to the discriminated masses. He also criticized the program for putting considerable emphasis on the positive aspects of Islam. Heaven forbid, literally, heaven forbid Islam should have any positive aspects like love thy neighbor. The letter demanded that Duke and UNC provide a revised listing of the program's activities in order to continue to receive federal funding. Kate Riga, also of Talking Points Memo, brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Gun manufacturer Colt is suspending its production of certain rifles, including the AR-15, for the civilian commercial market, though it will continue to supply them to the military and law enforcement. In a statement, CEO Dennis Villieu cited a glut of modern sporting rifles for civilians saturating the market, adding that all of Colt's manufacturing capabilities will be funneled into its significant high-volume military and law enforcement contracts. At the end of the day, we believe it is good sense to follow consumer demand and to adjust as market dynamics change. Colt has been a stout supporter of the Second Amendment for over 180 years, remains so, and will continue to provide its customers with the finest quality firearms in the world. Yeah, I should add that, your advocacy of the Second Amendment could apply to now, because if you're only supplying guns for the military, state militias, well-regulated entities, that's where military-grade weapons of war should be. In the armory, not in the arms of the civilian purchaser. In this reporter's opinion, of course. Okay, that takes us to our break, so let's go to our break. And when we come back, we will go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, more of It. Unlike some sequels, It Chapter 2 was imagined from the get-go when the decision to adapt Stephen King's 1986 novel was made. The action in 2 picks up with the Losers Club, some 27 years later, with a ripped-from-the-headlines type of assault on a Derry resident who survives but is then killed by the evil entity Pennywise. Mike, the only member of the club still residing in town, catches wind of the incident and, per agreement from back in the day, summons the other losers back to town from their varied lives across the country for the epic confrontation we know is coming. A significant portion of the movie's 170-minute runtime is devoted to developing the characters post-Chapter 1, and due to spot-on casting and exquisite execution by the likes of Jessica Chastain as Beverly, Bill Hader as Richie, and James McAvoy as the all-grown-up Bill, it all works pretty well. If taking issue with the running time, it is true that some of the side plots, such as Beverly's developing love triangle, and some of the flashbacks from the first one could probably have been cut to beneficial effect. Focus groups aren't always a bad thing, and if New Line did them after the first picture, they assuredly heard the message, more of Bill Skarsgård's Pennywise, and in Chapter 2, we get it. The clown is sadistic and articulately menacing as the losers try to invoke an untested Native American ritual to finally destroy it. It Chapter 2 is the first big-budget project from Argentine director Andy Muschietti, who gave us 2013's Mama with the support of Guillermo del Toro. Every risk Muschietti takes doesn't pay off, but he takes them, and enough of them do, to assure that It, too, doesn't disappoint. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Archaeologists have spent a lot of time analyzing the flashiest objects recovered at ancient sites. But now they're giving a second look at the waste and finding that it, too, tells tales about a culture. For example, 8,000-year-old poop recently revealed parasitic infections among people who lived in settlements versus their hunter-gatherer counterparts. And now archaeologists have examined another overlooked artifact, small stone flakes, typically thought to be byproducts from the production of tools like hand axes and cleavers.
it was not easy to convince the scientific community that there is value to study these items because they were regarded just as waste.
Ron Barkai, an archaeologist at Tel Aviv University. His team studied 283 stone flakes found in Israel at a site inhabited by our Homo erectus relatives 500,000 years ago. They found evidence of use, like small fractures along the edges of the inch-long flakes, but they also discovered bits of bone and flesh still sticking to the tiny blades, flesh that could have come from elephants. The big mammals were much more widespread back then and were a prominent source of protein for early humans in that area. The team then tested replicas of the flakes to butcher wild boars and deer and sheep, and they concluded that such tools would have been really useful to ancient hunters for skinning hides, filleting meat, and scraping every bit of nutrition out of an animal. Details and photos of the small scalpels are in the journal Scientific Reports. Barkai also says the tiny flakes suggest these people were more sophisticated than they get credit for.
Walmart was non-existent at the time, so they had to do everything by themselves, and the fact that they survived and thrived for hundreds of thousands of years tells me that they were highly capable, highly intelligent. I'm sure that they were no less intelligent than us. And if not their intelligence, we wouldn't be here.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60 Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm your host, Dr. Robert Gaines. Too many people are overindulging in alcohol and putting themselves at risk for death from alcohol poisoning. Dr. Daphna Kani is an epidemiologist with CDC's alcohol program in the National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. She's joining us today to discuss the dangers of binge drinking, including alcohol poisoning death. Welcome to the show, Daphna.
Thank you for having me.
Daphna, let's start with what is binge drinking?
Binge drinking is a dangerous pattern of alcohol consumption that is defined as 4 or more drinks for women on an occasion, 5 or more drinks for men on an occasion, usually in a short period of time. Binge drinking is the most common and most deadly pattern of excessive alcohol use, and most binge drinkers are not alcohol dependent. Binge drinking has many risks, and one of which is death from alcohol poisoning.
How common are deaths from alcohol poisoning in the U.S.?
More than 2,200 people die from alcohol poisoning each year in the United States, which translates to an average of 6 deaths each day.
Who is most at risk for death from alcohol poisoning?
3 in 4 alcohol poisoning deaths involve adults ages 35 to 64, and most of the deaths are among men. Non-Hispanic whites has the most number of deaths from alcohol poisoning, though alcohol poisoning death rates are highest among American Indians and Alaska Natives. About 70% of the deaths were among those who were not alcohol dependent.
Daphna, what are the signs of life-threatening alcohol poisoning?
When drinking a large amount of alcohol in a short period of time, it can result in very high levels of alcohol in the body, which can shut down critical areas of the brain that control breathing, heart rate, and body temperature. The life-threatening signs and symptoms of alcohol poisoning include an inability to wake up, vomiting, seizures, slow or irregular breathing, and low body temperature.
What are some ways to prevent deaths from alcohol poisoning?
First and foremost, don't binge drink. If you choose to drink, do so in moderation, up to 1 drink a day for women, up to 2 drinks a day for men. And get help for anyone experiencing life-threatening signs of alcohol poisoning. The key to prevent alcohol poisoning death is to prevent binge drinking.
Where can listeners get more information about binge drinking and alcohol poisoning?
You can find more information at cdc.gov/alcohol.
Thanks, Daphna. I've been talking today with CDC's Dr. Daphne Kani about the dangers of binge drinking and alcohol poisoning. Remember, more than 2,200 Americans die each year from alcohol poisoning. Life-threatening signs of alcohol poisoning include vomiting, seizures, inability to wake up, slowed or irregular breathing or heart rate, and bluish skin tone. For anyone exhibiting these signs, call 911 or get the person to a healthcare facility immediately. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Robert Gaines for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
A new level of despair has spread among tens of thousands of migrants at the U.S.-Mexico border who have been seeking refuge, in legal terms asylum, in the United States. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. And that's the beginning of a recent Associated Press report which goes on to explain the reason. Quote, the Trump administration has begun enforcing radical new restrictions on who qualifies for asylum, end quote, and who doesn't. And who doesn't is any refugee who has passed through a third country while fleeing for their lives on their way to the U.S. border, who hasn't applied for and been denied asylum in that country, which is to say, as a practical matter, that no refugee from Central America need apply for asylum. Let's return to the AP article. Quote, the United States is the only option, said Dunia Romero, a 31-year-old Honduran, who had tears in her eyes as she spoke at a shelter in Tijuana. She said she packed her bags and fled her homeland with her two boys, ages 7 and 11, after learning that her abusive ex-husband, a powerful gang leader, was going to have her killed. Under this administration's rule, this woman and her children cannot even be considered for asylum, at least not unless and until the Supreme Court strikes down the Trump administration's rule as violative of either national or international law. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1878. That was the day that socialist author Upton Sinclair was born in Baltimore, Maryland. A prolific writer, Sinclair wrote nearly 100 books and other publications. Upton Sinclair's father and father's relatives had been wealthy Southerners, but thanks to the Civil War and its aftermath, the family was left in financial ruins. His mother was from a wealthy Episcopalian family and was very strict. Sinclair often stayed with her wealthy parents. These family experiences growing up gave Sinclair an insight into how both the rich and poor lived. Sinclair studied at the City College of New York and for a time at Columbia University. He went on to write several popular novels that explored the experiences of working people in the rapidly industrializing United States. The Flyver King explored the impact of Henry Ford on auto production. Oil focused on the oil industry in Southern California. But Sinclair is best remembered for his classic expose of the Chicago meatpacking industry, The Jungle. The book was fiction, but based in fact. In 1904, he spent 7 weeks working undercover in Chicago's meatpacking plants to get material for the book. The Jungle was published in 1906 and was immediately a bestseller. It was originally published in serial form in a socialist newspaper. Sinclair said that he wrote the novel intending to set forth the breaking of human hearts by a system which exploits the labor of men and women for profit. The novel led to congressional legislation and federal regulation of the meatpacking industry. It helped lead to the passage of the Meat Inspection Act and the Pure Food and Drug Act. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
The global climate strike is on. It kicked off Friday morning in Australia with a reported 300,000 people gathering across the country. Climate activists are gathering in cities and towns around the world Friday in what organizers have predicted will be the biggest day of climate demonstrations in history. It's the third global climate strike inspired by 16-year-old Greta Thunberg, who tweeted early Friday, quote, "Incredible pictures as Australia's gathering for the hashtag climate strike. Australia is setting the standard." So tens of thousands of people have been pictured gathering in the streets of cities including London, Berlin, and Nairobi. Organizers say they expect people in 150 countries to join the global climate strikes throughout the day. Some workers from Amazon and Microsoft are walking off the job. Some companies are actually supporting their employees' participation in the strike. New York City gave 1.1 million students the okay to skip school for it. You can find an event near you, follow along, and take action at globalclimatestrike.net. A whistleblower inside the intelligence community filed a complaint about communications between Donald Trump and a foreign leader. The whistleblower was alarmed by a promise Trump allegedly made to the foreign leader. The democratically led House Intelligence Committee wants to see the complaint, but Joseph Maguire, the acting director of national intelligence, has blocked that. Now, he is set to testify before the committee next Thursday, September 26th. Meanwhile, the White House and the Justice Department told the office of the acting director of national intelligence not to share the complaint, claiming they don't believe it's governed by laws covering intelligence whistleblowers. But wait, there's more. Thursday night, the Washington Post and New York Times both reported that the communications at the center of all of this involved Ukraine. Now, Trump spoke to Ukrainian President Zelensky by phone in July. Some of his supporters have pushed for the Ukrainian government to open investigations that the president could then use to raise suspicions about his political rivals, most notably Joe Biden. As the latest shoe dropped Thursday night, Rachel Maddow spoke with the Washington Post's Shane Harris, who helped break the story, and he clarified what we've learned about the actual complaint.
When the Inspector General for the intelligence community testified today, and we understand that in that closed-door session with lawmakers, he said that this allegation by the whistleblower, it doesn't center on just one single event. So it's important that we're not simply focused on the phone call or the communication. It seems like there is more to it than that. It could be a series of events. It could be a pattern of behavior. We don't know. But we shouldn't be thinking about this as just a single incident. It sounds like that this whistleblower saw. It sounds like there is more kind of a tapestry here to try and examine.
Adam Schiff, chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, emerged from the closed-door hearing in which the intelligence community's Inspector General testified, but under orders from the White House and DOJ, refused to give details.
We will be releasing the Inspector General's letters, but I want to read one sentence from them. Mr. Atkinson wrote, "I set forth the reasons for my concluding that the subject matter involved in the complainant's disclosure not only falls within the DNI's jurisdiction, but relates to one of the most significant and important of the DNI's responsibilities to the American people." This is what's being withheld from Congress right now.
Then Congressman Schiff went on Maddow's show to fill us in on what's happening.
I just want to say what's at stake here and why this is so serious for us. The Intelligence Committee in both House and Senate do their work in closed session because we're dealing with classified information. But the result of that is outside stakeholders don't get to weigh in, don't get to correct the record, don't get to say that the intelligence agency representation on this isn't accurate. We rely on the agencies to self-report when they have problems, and much of the time they do. But when they don't, we are totally reliant on whistleblowers, which means if you can nullify that process, which the Department of Justice is effectively doing, it means the ability to do oversight is just crippled. And it means that serious problems, urgent problems that affect our national security go unaddressed like this one. And it means that other whistleblowers who are watching, and I want to say to the whistleblower, if the whistleblower is watching you tonight, that we are grateful for their courage in coming forward. We are going to do everything we can to make sure this urgent issue is addressed and that you are protected.
To be continued. The remnants of Tropical Storm Imelda are pushing into northern Texas, Arkansas, and Louisiana Friday, dumping heavy rain along the way. The storm left a mess in southeast Texas, where some areas got more than 30 inches of rain. Already there are reports of 2 people dead and at least 1,700 rescued from Imelda's floodwaters. Out in the Atlantic, Hurricane Jerry has developed. At press time, it's a Category 2 storm and is expected to pass just north of the Leeward Islands Friday before moving north of Puerto Rico and the Bahamas over the weekend. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports, I invite you to check out The Nicole Sandler Show. We're now heard Tuesday through Friday at 5 Eastern, 2 Pacific, right here on the Progressive Voices Network. You can always download the podcast as well at NicoleSandler.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Looks like we will be mostly cloudy, though it's a little foggy at the moment. A tad warmer today, about 73 to 75. Winds will remain light and variable throughout the day, throughout the night, and tomorrow. Overnight lows in the mid to low 50s. Expecting a high tomorrow about 80. And mostly sunny tomorrow. We will be clear tonight. Small chance of rain increasing late tomorrow. And then we are expecting about a third or more of an inch of rain on Sunday. So we can only hope we still do. Ragweed pollen is rated at low. The air quality index is in the good range at 29 parts per million. And that daytime UV index is moderate, though it has ticked down one more notch to 4. Wow. It's all the angle of the sun, folks. The angle of the sun. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.12 inches. Visibility is down to 6 miles. And relative humidity is at 100%. 100. And it's not raining. But there is a little bit of a foggy drizzle. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchase. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Okay, that's my P-tape, not yours. London is 68 degrees and sunny. Paris is 77 and sunny. Rome is 83 and sunny with a heat advisory. Wow. Kiev is 54 and partly cloudy with wind. Kabul is 75 and fair. Hong Kong is 80 and fair. Tokyo is 73 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 65 degrees and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 58 degrees and sunny. And New York, New York is 67 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchase. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Amnesty International accused Hong Kong police of torture and other abuses in their handling of more than 3 months of pro-democracy protests. But the police say they have shown restraint on the street in the face of increased violence. I guess showing restraint is not blasting them with cannon fire. Anti-government protesters, many masked and wearing black, have thrown petrol bombs at police and central government offices, stormed the Legislative Council, blocked roads to the airport, trashed metro stations, and lit fires on the streets of the Chinese-ruled city. Wow, you'd think those people were mad. Police have responded with tear gas, water cannons, rubber bullets, beanbag rounds, and several live rounds fired in the air, warning the crowds beforehand with a series of different colored banners. Red means live fire, duck. They have also been seen beating protesters on the ground with batons, with footage of one such attack on cowering passengers on an MTR subway train going viral online and prompting widespread anger. The evidence leaves little room for doubt. In an apparent thirst for retaliation, Hong Kong security forces have engaged in a disturbing pattern of reckless and unlawful tactics against people during the protests. Nicholas Bequelin, East Asia director at Amnesty International, said in a report following a field investigation. This has included arbitrary arrests and retaliatory violence against arrested persons in custody, some of which has amounted to torture.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Even more anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Fumigation against mosquitoes in Cuba and not sonic attacks may have caused some 40 U.S. and Canadian diplomats and their family members in Havana to fall ill, according to a new study commissioned by the Canadian government. The incidents took place from late 2016 into 2018, causing the administration of U.S. President Donald Trump. I'm sorry, we normally don't say the P word with Donnie Duma 2 scoops, or Duma Donnie 2 scoops, but we did this time. We apologize. Well, he wanted to charge that diplomats were attacked by some sort of secret weapon. Canada has refrained from such charges because, hey, they're reasonable people there, aren't they? Well, a lot of them are. The U.S. in 2017 reduced its embassy staff to a minimum, and Canada followed more recently, citing the incidents and the danger posed to staff from what has become known as the Havana Syndrome. Various scientific studies have yet to identify the cause of the diplomats' cognitive ailments, ranging from dizziness and blurred vision to memory loss and difficulty concentrating. The study was the first to include diplomats for whom there was a baseline medical testing from before their postings in Havana. Some pesticides work by inhibiting a key enzyme, the report said, and during the 2016-2018 period when diplomats became ill, normal fumigation in Cuba was stepped up due to the Zika epidemic in the Caribbean. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and for the week. But you do know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on, and we will meet up on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up on Monday right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Coët. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.